Governors.
Good evening and welcome to the program The Nigerian Governors, live here on Silverbird Television, coming to you straight from our Abuja studios. It's a pleasure meeting you or having you on the program in the year 2022. I hope 2021 was, well, it was a turbulent year for most people, and indeed a challenging one, particularly when it comes to the issue of security, not just at the federal level, but of course across the states as well. That was a serious topic of discussion. And coming into the year 2022, I mean, you hear a state governor asking the president to declare certain organizations, terrorist groups. But we might scratch a little bit on that in the course of the program. But today on the show, we're going to be looking at a very interesting topic, a topic which to a lot of people does not really make a lot of sense. And to some, it has been a source of worry, yet the right questions are not asked, because at the end of the day, the government at the center is usually accused for not doing enough in curbing the issues of security across the country. Well, right, so some of you would say. Now we're going to be looking at the issue of security votes, governors and security votes. By the way, my name is Aonduna Inga. I forgot that totally. So let's look at it. I'm going to give you a basic definition of what security votes is. Now I had to search through Google to get this definition, all right? And it says security vote in Nigeria is, so obviously it's a term that is peculiar to Nigeria. It says security vote in Nigeria is a monthly allowance that is allocated to the 36 states within the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the sole purpose of funding security services within such states. The monthly funds run into billions of naira and vary based on the level of security required by the individual states. So that, if for instance you've never heard of the definition of what security vote is, there you have it. On the program today, we're going to be looking at governors and the security votes. You would recall that just a couple of days back, there was a damning report about the issue of security votes, where it says that governors, local government chairmen pocket over 375 billion naira security votes annually. Your guess is as good as mine. And yet we have the issues of security across the country. We'll go on a quick break now. When we come back, we'll meet our guests and then we'll go right into our discussion. Stay with us.
Nigerian Governors.
Welcome back. The program is the Nigerian Governors Live. My name is Aonduna Inga, your host on the program. Well, when I introduce you to my guests, I need you to have one thing in mind. This is not the battle of those who are the bearded, okay? It is not the battle of the bearded. However, my guest on the show is not entirely new to you. He is someone who is very concerned about the state of the country, and he never turns down an opportunity to talk about certain sensitive issues as far as the state of Nigeria is concerned. He's not the person but Mr. Taguba Agboje. He is a legal practitioner based here in the city of Abuja as well. Mr. Taguba, thank you so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me on tonight.
And Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you too.
All right, so we're looking at this topic, governors and security votes. You heard my definition there. Yeah. And truthfully, most Nigerians talk about security votes, and we most times do not even know the history of what security vote is all about. And the question most people will ask is, do we even have relevant laws backing the whole idea of security votes, to start with?
Well, this is a very interesting topic, because when you mention the issue of security vote on the street to the ordinary man considers it as a form of institutionalized stealing. That's how it's seen. And this is not far-fetched from its history. You know, under the military, particularly General Ibrahim Babangida, we started this issue of giving monthly allocation to the then state administrators,
yeah,
you know, under the guise of security, and that itself got absorbed by the system that we operate now. You know, the democratic norms that we operate now, that got absorbed into it, such that you have state governors presenting, you know, every time they, you know, the budget presentation to the Houses of Assembly, even the president when he does that, you have items that are just listed as, you know, security vote in quote, line items, you know, which basically there's no explanation as to how that sum will be expended, to whom that sum will be given to. Nobody knows how. It's left at the discretion of the state government, state governors, you know, to expend this money. And most times, this money is expended largely in cash. You know, so what begs, I mean, the question that begs my mind every time I look at it is the question of security. Now, the question of security itself is a constitutional issue. If you look at the Constitution, the federal government is responsible solely for the security of the state and for the nation. Because all the apparatus of security, the police, the army, the navy, just name them, all the apparatus, all are controlled by the executive, by the federal executive. And every time you have the Ministry of Defense present its budget for security for the year. So the question is, why are you giving state governments monthly allocation running into several millions to expend on security when they don't have any control whatsoever of any of the security infrastructure that we run in this country?
But like, you know, you started off the conversation by saying, asking the question, referring to the layman on the streets. But then again, the layman would want to make an argument, particularly for state governors, because oftentimes we see state governors buy Hilux vehicles, vans, and what have you, motorcycles, and donate to, you know, to the police commands in their various states.
Yes.
And one would say that that perhaps is one of the reasons why the security votes are available, you know, amongst other reasons as well.
That argument is disingenuous. And the reason why it's disingenuous is because the foundation for every appropriation is constitutional, must be hinged on law. If that is the case, the question that we need to ask every time the state governor buys a handout of vehicles to the police or to whoever, the question is, who is in control of this security infrastructure? Let me give you a very clear example of what happened recently between the Lagos state governor and that of the police. That tells everybody that the state governors are not in charge of the security architecture. They bear the name Chief Security Officer of the state, but they are not in charge of the security architecture. So therefore, whatever spending that ought to be done, first of all, ought to have been included in the budget of the various institutions, like the police and all that. And well, let me even shock you. These so-called sums, if you put the total amount of security votes that governors have taken over the years, and particularly in an annual year, it trumps this, the budgeted sum for security by the Navy, by the police, by the army. Put all of them together. The security vote far outpaces the sum that is budgeted every year for this security.
But if that is the case, one will ask the question, so to what end? How does this, it's so mind-boggling, because you have a situation where so much money goes to state governors, yet they are not in charge, directly in charge of security apparatus in their states. So is this some sort of, are you alleging some sort of institutional corruption, you know, aided by the federal government?
Yeah.
Or how exactly does this play out?
See, well, let's not color the fact. As far as I'm concerned, it is institutional stealing. Now, why do I say that? Some will argue that it is appropriated for. It is budgeted, and the State House of Assemblies all approve such budgeting. But again, I say it's disingenuous, because this amount that is budgeted is not subject to any form of accountability on the part of the executive to the National Assembly and to the State Assembly. And that in itself is unconstitutional, Because the National Assembly and the State Houses of Assembly have under their mandate a right to oversee and ensure accountability for every fund that is appropriated. But this so-called security vote, nobody accounts for it. The executive does not account for it. Nobody can ask them questions how it is spent. And this money is public funds. How can someone who is elected by the people refuse to account to the people? And again, others will say it's spent on security, but you don't have to disclose all the issues concerning security. Fine, relevant argument. But again, it is disingenuous. Disingenuous in the sense that we are not saying tell us how many bullets you bought. That's not what we are saying. We are saying that if you spent 100 million naira, tell us who it went to and for what it went for. But in this instance, nobody can ask that kind of question. How can that happen in a democracy?
Let me take you up on this. Interestingly, I was actually in court on the day of this pronouncement, but I'm just going to pull it out. I had to pull it out. It says the Court of Appeal sitting in Abuja declared that the failure of public officers to give an account of security votes entrusted to them amount to stealing or criminal misappropriation, adding that it is akin to genocide. This formed part of the grounds for the court's affirmation of the conviction of a former governor of Taraba State, Reverend Jolly Inyami, whom the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, had earlier convicted and sentenced to 14 years imprisonment on June 30th. According to Justice Emmanuel Agim, who read the lead judgment, there is pervasive tendency by public officers to regard or treat security votes given to them for security of their states as their personal entitlement. Has that been the case?
That is entirely the case, and my Lord has summed it up in very poignant words. Well, let me tell you, anything that is subject to secrecy and done in secrecy is subject to abuse. And that is the case here. You have a situation where some states, I'm telling you, some states will generate, as it were, issues of security for the purposes of collecting security vote.
That's a very strong...
Yes, because...
That's a strong allegation, I must say.
Let me say this, right? The amount a state collects for a security vote is based on the nature of security issues that it has within its territory.
Let me give an... Let's for clarity's sake, are you saying, by your pronouncement, that if, for instance, a Benue State or a state somewhere in the southeast where presumably we used to know as very peaceful, all of a sudden we've seen this level of violence across the state, are you suggesting that there's a tendency that state actors make these things happen for the purpose of the security votes? Is that what you're insinuating?
Now, what I'm saying is this, that for the very fact that how this sum is spent is shrouded in secrecy, it's opaque, for that very reason, I can assume that there are persons, third actors or however you call them, who will, for the purposes of collecting this security vote, will cause a situation that will lead to an increase in the security vote. Because the appropriation of these funds is based on how peaceful or riotous a state is. Now, if you look at states like Rivers and Cross Rivers and all that, where they have pipelines, vandalism and everything, if you look at the amount that they collect, it's quite higher than every other state. Why? Because of the security issues that they have in their state. So what stops a corrupt actor within the government from causing such chaos in order for it to get more money? Because what it means is security vote is you get more if you have more trouble. So the very fact that this amount is shrouded in secrecy and nobody accounts for it leads to my proposition that there may be state actors who have led us into a place of chaos where we are right now because they are making profit off the blood of Nigerians.
But here's the thing. Most times it is very convenient for us to just put all the blame at the foot of state actors, governors in this case. But are we forgetting the fact that a pronouncement was made by the Justice of the Appeal Court And yet Nigerians did not follow up on this, insisting that security votes be made public knowledge. So would you entirely blame those in government, or perhaps put a portion of this blame on the average Nigerian as well? Or is it that we don't know anything about it at all?
Now, I think we are all to blame for this. And my point is, those who are leading us were elected by the people, and the power resides with the people. Now, if we want things to change in this country, it must be people-led. The leaders will not change anything. It is those who are being led, who feel aggrieved or who are dissatisfied, that will initiate the process to change the leadership and bring in those who will entrench what the people want. So for the fact that nobody has said anything, and we still have leaders, we still have people in power who are still towing this path of corruption, we the people, we are to blame, because they answer to us.
Let's look at the fact that, bottom line here is that this is not something that will go away anytime soon, unfortunately. We may keep hearing the word security votes, and before you know it, it's swept under the carpet. But for the purpose of a governor who may want to really use these security votes to entrench security in their various states, in your mind, how do you think this should work in the first instance?
Now, you can't do anything outside the law. Even if you are the governor, you can't do anything outside the law. So the question is, does the governor have control over the security infrastructure of this country? The governor does not. So how is he spending this money? How do you spend money over something you don't have control over?
Well, perhaps there are vigilantes
now,
gathering intelligence and what have you.
You don't have, the state governors don't have any agency that has to do with intelligence in the first place. And again, if anything happens in this country as we speak today, all the security situations we have across the nation, everybody blames the president. There are state governors who have come all the way to Aso Rock. I remember the president saying that there were some governors that came to see him, and he asked them to go to their state to sort it out. Even though I don't agree with the president. But everybody blames the president. Why? Because the Constitution gives the president the powers, the control over the security infrastructure. So if you are giving security votes to state governors, to spend, are they paying kidnappers? Who are they giving these monies to? The money some state governors receive as security vote, those monies is more than 1/3. State governors is more than 1/3 of the budget of some security agencies.
How do we address the situation? Now we are here. We are at this impasse now, but how do we address the situation? Because from all you're saying, all I can deduce is the federal government has to come to two things. The federal government has to come to a point where it stops allocating these sums of money to state government, since there are no security agencies under the control of state governors. Or make this public knowledge for Nigerians so that we know exactly how and where this money is going to from state governors.
I'll propose three things. First of all, the federal government should start giving state governors or state governments security votes, because they don't have control over the security.
That is going to be a catastrophe.
Yes.
Looking at political interests and what have you.
Yes. Now, the linchpin for the continuation of this security vote is the political interest of these parties, of these governors. That is the linchpin. That is why we are still where we are, because these monies are being pilfered. Nobody accounts for it. They use it for their personal interest. If you look at Transparency International, its report on security votes, it particularly stated that a large portion of this money is secreted away by governors to fund their political campaigns and their political interests. a large portion. The other part of it is, which is still constitutional, in my view, is that the federal government cannot be solely responsible for security across the nation. We are seeing it. It has failed. We need to have regional, as it were, state security infrastructures, like state police. Maybe by then, when we talk about security vote, it will make more sense because the governors will now be able to fund the state police structures that they have in their various states.
So in other words, as far as the issue of security vote stands, then we need to start looking at the issue of state policing as well.
I believe so. I believe so. Because if that fund is for security, then let there be a structure upon which the governors are spending this money. Without state police, there is nothing they are spending that money on. The federal government is solely responsible under this constitution.
All right, so so much has been said, and from all you've said, it gives a feeling of hopelessness. Unfortunately, it may sound that way because when you look at the fact that from 1999 up until now, the conversation around security votes has been ongoing. Well, at some point, the money just went in, but the conversation has been ongoing, and yet it seems as though nothing is happening. But what gives you the slightest hope, if there is at all, that this culture will change in any way? Lastly, before we wrap up.
Now, if you're talking about hope, I think I'm optimistic that this country will, as it were, reverse itself from the precipice where we are right now, and we'll have to change the way we are working as a nation. But the fundamental document upon which we have found ourselves as a country, as a people, is the Constitution. And for me, everything will be traced back to the Constitution itself. Until we amend that Constitution, until we have a sit down and talk about how we are going to relate to one another in unity, we're going to have problems. Until we're able to do that, I don't think we're going to, get out of the woods so quickly. But the Constitution itself must be looked at. And again, it brings me back to the issue of state policing. The last time the president said he was not very amenable to the idea of state policing. But I beg to differ. What we have on ground right now calls for a critical look at our security infrastructure. And the mere fact that there's a possibility of abuse of a thing does not in itself invalidate the idea of a thing. So if he feels that the state policing will be abused by state governors, at the end of the day, we have the other arm of government, which is the judiciary, that is able to check the excesses of the executive and these agencies. And he should have some hope and trust that those who are in the judiciary are able to handle this situation rather than just a blanket no-go on this issue.
Mr. Atagba Agboje, thank you so much
thank you.
for discussing this topic with us. That's governors and security votes. Well, you heard it there. In the course of the discussion, Mr. Atagba was very clear on the role the Nigerian public has to play. For instance, the elections are around the corner. Are we going to ask questions around this area? We've seen the level of insecurity across Nigeria. In every state, almost every state across Nigeria, there has been one security problem or the other. So are these questions going to be put before state governors about the security votes, how these monies are spent, how how they basically spend all of this money? Are we going to ask some of those critical questions, or perhaps just results to the simple collecting of bags of rice and wrappers and all of that, and at the end of the day, you know, every other thing is swept under the carpet? Thank you so much for coming on the program, and I do hope that at home you enjoyed this show, and it also has given you an insight to what security vote is and what we must do to come out of the woods. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. My name is Aon Dunai Ingia. Another edition of the program comes your way, same time, same station next week. Do stay with us. Bye-bye for now.
The Nigerian governors.